welcome to this week's episode of Matchup Maximizer, presented by Keeping Karlsson. I'm your host, Jeremy Versillo, and I'm going to be taking you all through Yahoo Week 23 for fantasy hockey. This is likely your quarterfinal week in most leagues. If not, it may be your last week of the regular season or a semifinal week, but most of the leagues, including the Cupful, the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, it is quarterfinals, so some big matchups, and got to get the right streams in order to eke out as many points as possible. When I'm done, I'm also going to take a quick look at Week 24, the semifinal week. I'm not going to go into specific players to add, but I will talk about teams and about the schedule, because honestly, Yahoo Week 24 semifinals is one of the worst fantasy schedule weeks I have ever seen. And you're going to want to get ahead of it if you have a bye or if you end up with a big lead in your quarterfinal matchup. To summarize this coming week, though, Week 23, there are 12 teams with 4-game weeks. Everyone else plays 3. Tuesday is very busy with 26 teams playing, while Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday are moderately busy, kind of on that heavy day line with 22 games on Thursday and Saturday and 20 on Sunday. I know in one of my leagues, I actually can't fit someone on Sunday, so you should look at your own lineup and schedule before jumping on these streams, because you may have room on Thursday and Saturday, and you may not have room on Sunday, so the traditional Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday streamer schedule might not be all too beneficial for you. The best schedule for this week goes to the struggling Washington Capitals. They play on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, which means you're almost guaranteed 3 games and pretty likely to get the 4th one, or could rotate that player out for a Saturday, Sunday guy if he doesn't fit your lineup on Sunday. Their matchups aren't the greatest, though, with Calgary, Toronto, Carolina, and Winnipeg. The Calgary matchup is fine because they're going to be playing a backup goalie, but Toronto, Carolina, and Winnipeg are pretty stingy defensive teams. And if you look through the Caps' last couple weeks of schedule, they've really struggled to put goals up against playoff-bound opponents. They've had games where they've put up 5 or 6, but it's against teams like Pittsburgh or New Jersey, where they aren't great teams to begin with, but as soon as they start playing the teams near the top of the league, there's a lot of 1, 2, and 0 goal games in there. I'd be a bit nervous to stream anybody from Washington. I will say Dylan Strome, TJ Oshie are available in a couple of Cupful leagues. Those are mildly interesting, getting good deployment and guaranteed power play 1 time. Keep an eye on the fact that Oshie is apparently a game time decision tonight, Saturday, so I'm not sure what's up there. Gotta be careful and make sure he's not injured again before you add him. Or maybe you can add him directly to IR and not have to drop someone until Monday for him. Charlie Lindgren is also available in a handful of leagues if you want a goalie. I suspect he's going to get 3 of those 4 starts, just not sure which ones. Kemper's been really bad lately, and Lindgren has actually been winning them games, which apparently they still want to do, because I think they are still kind of pushing to try to make that last playoff spot. He looks like the better goalie, and while Kemper's available too, I would not be adding him because of the aforementioned allowing a lot of goals problems. Another team with a pretty good schedule is the Seattle Kraken. They play Monday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday, so they avoid that busy Tuesday, get you 2 guaranteed off nights, and have only the moderately busy days for their other games. Their opponents are slightly better than Washington's, but they also struggle with the same whole not scoring goals thing. The nice thing is Seattle, because of their constant line blenders and pretty egalitarian deployment, often have some good players available. Their opponents that I referenced are Buffalo, Vegas, Arizona, and Montreal. And while Buffalo and Montreal actually have been pretty good defensively as of late, Vegas and Arizona are less scary than they were earlier in the season, with the Coyotes just coming off a very long losing streak, and Vegas struggling also and have given up quite a few goals in the process. Some Kraken players who are available that I like are all the right wings, actually. Oliver Bjorkstrand, Jordan Everly, Eeli Tolvanen. I like Tolvanen the best of those. I've noticed recently they're kind of running their power play to set up a one-timer from him. I will say it hasn't really been working, but they are giving him that Stamkos Ovechkin type pass from the D for a one-timer from the top of the circle, and if he chooses not to take that shot, he often threads a cross-ice pass to McCann, which is one of their other lethal shooters. So Eeli Tolvanen is definitely my preferred guy over Bjorkstrand or Eberle. They're all getting about equal even strength deployment. If you're in a league that counts hits, I'd look at Adam Larsson or Will Borgen defensively, along with Yanni Gourde on the forward side. They can get you some pretty good value even if the Kraken aren't scoring goals or getting points. Also, in Cupful at least, both Joey Daccord and Philip Grubauer are relatively widely available. I think they were both in the 50 to 70% owned range, which is pretty low for a goaltender. I would be happy to add either of them that is starting on Monday, and then hold for the guaranteed game either Thursday or Friday. And then from there, you can decide what to do before Sunday. I'm not even going to take a speculation as to who's starting. Grubauer's got tonight's game, so if they're actually alternating, it'll be going back to Daccord. Daccord played really well, except for one brain fart where he cost his team a goal his last game, and Grubauer gave up 5 goals his last game. So if Grubauer gets hit hard tonight, it may go back to Joey. But before that, they had been riding Grubauer for a couple games in a row. Long story short, I don't know. Wait and see for the confirmed Monday if you're interested in adding a goalie for those games, and hope you have the quick fingers. Now, I'm not going to highlight all of the teams with 4-game schedules because, as I pointed out in the intro, there are 12 teams with that, and if we did that, this would be an hour-long matchup maximizer, which I'm sure Elon does not want to edit. Instead, I'm going to look at 3 more 4-game teams that I think either have interesting players or good schedules to deal with. These are all going to fall under the please check your own lineup before adding them because there's no guarantee you will be able to fit these players. Tampa Bay plays on all of the busy days, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. But they have some pretty good opponents. They play Vegas on Tuesday, who, as I mentioned before, has been giving up a lot of goals. But if that's the one game you can't fit a Tampa guy, that's the least of your concerns because their next 3 are against San Jose, Los Angeles, who I'll admit is pretty good, and Anaheim. I think you can expect a lot of goals in the San Jose and Anaheim games. Even the Vegas game, I could see Tampa putting in 4 or 5. They've been on a bit of a heater lately, and one of the guys who has been added to the team via the trade deadline is the one I'm going to recommend from Tampa. Anthony Duclair is only 72% owned in Cupful leagues. He has goals in each of his games with Tampa Bay, and he's been playing with Kucherov in point, and then sometimes with Stamkos and Hagel. They've been kind of shuffling that top 6, but it does appear that Anthony Duclair is part of that top 6 and playing on the second power play unit, and those are some dangerous players to be getting passes from, so I'm actually kind of disappointed I can't fit Duclair in any of my leagues this week, and I have not found someone I'm willing to drop for him, but he could be a difference maker come playoff time, especially with 4 games next week. One other bolt to look at, Anthony Cirelli has been the flavor of the week on Power Play 1 for the last 10 or 12 games, so it's more than a flavor of the week at this point. That's almost a month straight where he's been getting greater than 50% of Power Play time. I would be interested in him as long as he holds that. He's also been playing in the top 6 a lot, so although the numbers aren't really there, the results, I think Cirelli is a good trust the process type of ad and hope that he gets in on a couple of them. He's only 11% owned in Cupful. Another team I'd like to look at is the Buffalo Sabres. Buffalo plays Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, so the nice thing is you get that back-to-back to start the week and then could pivot to a Wednesday, Friday, Sunday guy. Another reason I'm highlighting Buffalo is they are one of the few teams in Week 24 with a salvageable schedule for streaming. I mentioned before that Week 24 is a bit of a disaster. I'll get to that in about 10 minutes at the end of the episode. But if you want to add a Buffalo guy and can fit them for 4 games this week, you then don't have to use another move at the start of next week when your playoff run continues. JJ Peterka is the most highly owned streamer guy, but he's actually been fading a lot lately. He's shooting less than earlier this year. His power play time is going down. I'm not really interested in Peterka. Instead, I would be looking towards Jordan Greenway or Zach Benson. They've both been in the top 6. Greenway has been very physical lately. He's been getting, a couple shots, like sometimes 4 to 5 hits in a game. He's blocking shots. He plays on the penalty kill and on one of the power play units, which has kind of rotated around depending on who's hurt for a given game. He's only 13% owned. I think he has both left and right wing eligibility too, which is nice. Greenway's a pretty good option if he fits your schedule. Benson has been on a hot streak. He's a rookie. He's going to be streaky, but he's only 4% owned. I would take him over Peterka for sure. Last but not least, I'm not really interested in Girgensons. I know he's been on the top line. He's also done nothing with it, and despite being on the top line, is only playing like 11 or 12 minutes a night, probably because he doesn't get power play time, and they pull him off in late game situations when they need a goal, when they'll stack the top line. So yeah, Greenway first, Benson second from Buffalo. I actually know some of the bye-week teams in a few of my leagues have already added Greenway, so if you want him, get on it fast. I suspect any team preparing for semifinal week 24 is just going to go straight to Buffalo guys. Yeah, that was at least my advice as early as draft season. I wanted at least one Sabre on my roster to help ease that potential playoff week, and I know people have started looking that far ahead at schedule once they locked in their bye week, as many teams have. Carolina is another team I'm going to mention with 2 off nights and one of the easiest 4-game schedules. Their opponents are on Tuesday, the Islanders, on Thursday, Philadelphia, on Friday, Washington, and on Sunday, Toronto. Those Philly and Washington matchups are pretty juicy. The Islanders one is always nice also, if you can fit them. The guy I'm actually looking at from Carolina is the newly acquired new man, Evgeny Kuznetsov. He came back from the player assistance program, got traded before playing in a game for Washington. There were references to a fresh start, and he's been playing in the top 6 and on the second power play. From the eye test, he's looked pretty good, I'll admit. I, being a Caps fan, I have a lot of trouble trusting Kuznetsov because he's been streaky in the past, but it does seem like he's really turned things around, and he's the most interesting, widely available Hurricane. I was going to recommend Brady Shea here as a defenseman, but it turns out in Cupful at least, he's 100% owned, which I assume has to do with the schedule this week, including the Saturday-Sunday back-to-back. That surprised me a bit. I don't really have interest in their other defensemen like Slavin or Orlov or Pesci. Their goalies are both pretty interesting. Anderson's like 96 or 98% owned. Kochekov's in the 90s also. But if one of them is available, that could be nice to get a couple starts from it, similar to the team I mentioned earlier, which I'm forgetting. Similar to Seattle. You could potentially get a Tuesday plus either a Thursday or Friday start if you correctly guess who gets that Tuesday game. At this point, I'm guessing it will be Kochetkov because he is getting Saturday's game, which means Freddie Anderson gets Sunday, and they seem to be alternating, and both goalies are playing well. I'm a little bit leery of Kane's goalies because they did just re-sign Spencer Martin to another 1-year contract, and he played well in a couple games for them. I can't tell if that's a future-proofing replacement for next year when they lose a bunch of guys to free agency, or if they're planning on keeping him on the NHL roster as a third goalie and giving him an occasional start. That would really suck if you were planning on an alternating goalie strategy and then suddenly Spencer Martin takes a game from one of your guys. Last but not least, I'll mention one team with a 3-game schedule. Those of you who've listened to me before know that I am a quantity over quality guy when it comes to streaming. I would almost always rather get 4 starts from a nobody then 3 starts from a guy I think might be good, because at this point when you're looking at the waiver wire, none of the players are actually sure bets in fantasy. It's just going off hunches and getting things that you want so you feel like you're in control of your own destiny instead of grabbing the last available guy. But the Dallas Stars play 3 times, only on off nights, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. So they should be easy to fit into your lineup. I guess Sunday isn't really an off night, as I mentioned before, so check that. But Dallas's opponents are Arizona, Pittsburgh, and Arizona again. Those are teams that have been giving up a lot of goals lately. I say as Pittsburgh has given up 6 goals to the Rangers in about 50 minutes of play. I could see Dallas putting in, 12 to 15 goals next week, spread across all their lines. That leaves Logan Stankoven as the most interesting player from them. He's about 70% owned in Cupful. He's been cold since his roaring hot start, his first couple games after the call-up, but he's still been involved. He's had a couple 3 and 4 shot games. He's playing on a line with Wyatt Johnston and Jamie Benn, which is a good place to play. He's been on power play too, getting 15, 16 minutes a night most nights. I like Stankoven. I think he's going to stick in the lineup. I think he's a worthwhile add, especially if you can wait until Wednesday morning to do it. Other guys that might be of interest, Thomas Harley's available in a handful of leagues. He's been really cold lately, though. I'm not sure I would be going back to that well. And then Mason Marchment and Sam Steele are technically on the second line with Duchesne, although at this point I would consider the Wyatt Johnston line the second line over Duchesne's line, even if the line combos on Twitter and on other sites are listing them as the third line. Some other real quick rapid-fire notes that I saw on the schedule. Colorado has a nice Friday-Sunday schedule, getting Columbus and Pittsburgh, so keep them in mind later in the week if you're rotating someone out. Middlestat was seeing PP one time with Druin and Lehkonen hurt or sick, but both of them appear to be back. I still expect Middlestat to be the second-line center, which could be interesting, but I don't think he'll be PP1. And the defensemen in Colorado always seem to be interesting, Manson, I think Taze is probably fully owned. Girard would be next guy up. Especially when they traded Byram, there's a chance they may have a bit more ice time for the other guys in that top 4. Minnesota plays Anaheim and LA Tuesday, Wednesday, so you could get 2 early games from someone like Ryan Hartman, or you could get one of the goalies because Fleury and Gustafsson are both 70 to 80% available. Calgary has a 4-day gap following a Monday game, so they play Monday and then don't play again till Saturday. I would consider dropping Calgary guys, especially if they can only fit one of Saturday or Sunday. You could get 3 games in the meantime there from someone, or a 4-gamer that fits your schedule. Guys like Markstrom, Uyghur, Rasmus Anderson, Kadri, Sharangovich, and Coleman would be tough drops. But honestly, I think Uyghur is the only absolutely do not drop this guy. I would consider dropping even Kadri or Sharangovich. Markstrom I'd drop in a pinch if I've used up all my IR slots and he's still hurt. Really depends on how desperate you are or what your schedule looks like. I could definitely see some managers not being able to fit a guy on either Saturday or Sunday, so you're not going to hold a mediocre Calgary player for the entire week after already getting their 1 game. Last but not least, Toronto plays 4 games in the style of 2 back-to-backs. That means both of their goalies will get 2 starts, Samsonov and Wool. Should be an easier one early in the week and a tougher one over the weekend. I forget exactly who the opponents are, but I remember their weekend opponents were much better than their Tuesday, Wednesday ones. So if you have room for a goalie, that could be an interesting add. I think both of them are mostly pretty widely owned, but they could be available in your league. That's all I wanted to talk about with regards to Week 23. So I'm going to pick my streamers of the week real quick. My go-to streamer of the week would be Anthony Duclair, if you can fit him for all 4 games, or even 3 of those 4 games. If you're more targeting the off-night streamers, Tolvanen and Stankoven are the guys I'm looking at. Hopefully those guys will do well for you. Definitely keep an eye on Duclair and look at your schedule before adding any of them, though. Now for week 24. As I said at the top, this schedule sucks. Tuesday has 24 teams playing, Thursday has 28, and Saturday has 30. On top of that, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday are very late days, and no team plays more than 2 off nights. The moral of the story here is you will be benching guys, almost guaranteed, at least on Thursday and Saturday. That's a pet peeve of mine. I hate benching a guy every time I set my lineup for a week and have a guy on a bench even for one game. I go through the thought of, okay, does this guy really need to be on my roster? Because I would rather get 4 games from someone else than 2 games from kind of a fringy guy that I'd be benching Saturday anyway. But I digress. My advice, if you are preloading for week 24, if you're a bye team or you get off to a hot start in week 23, be sure you have a 4th defenseman and a 2nd goalie for this week. I know I am perfectly happy to run 3 defensemen or 1 goalie much of the regular season, but for a week like this, if you're holding too many forwards, you're just going to lose a ton of starts and a ton of potential points. I'd definitely be looking at some of those fringier, high volume but poor team goalies like Mrazek or Krona to see if you can get a couple more starts in there. Defensemen, it's a bit easier to find. There's a couple teams that play 4 games that week. You could easily add a 4th defenseman just to get the volume and try to squeak out as many points as possible. Also, if you have a bye, it goes without saying, keep an eye out for roster-worthy player drops that come from desperate teams, either tomorrow or next Sunday. Plenty of leagues have had guys dropped that are either full on Saturday or aren't playing Saturday or aren't playing Sunday that may be nice additions to your team in the long run. As for the teams to look at for week 24, I mentioned Buffalo has the Wednesday-Friday off nights, and they have a good schedule this week, so keep them in mind. Vancouver plays Monday, Thursday, Sunday, so you at least get 2 off nights there. Definitely going to be a matter of rotating out the right players when you can for that busy week. The only 2 4-game teams are Vegas and Anaheim, but they all play all 3 busy nights. You may be able to fit a Vegas guy Monday, Tuesday, so Logan Thompson is a good option if you're willing to grab a goalie and then figure out what you're doing with him after Tuesday. And Anaheim if you want defensemen, or Vegas if you want defensemen. I think Alec Martinez started skating today, so he may come off the IR soon. That could be a nice addition to your team. Last but not least, I'm going to end this show as always with our Sunday saviors. If you are desperate for some help on Sunday of week 22, here's a couple players you should consider streaming for just 1 game and try to get that 10-point jackpot or that 15-point jackpot. Braden Shen and Jake Neighbors on St. Louis are both playing against Anaheim, who's given up a lot of goals lately. Shen's 62% Cacupful owned on line 1 with Kyrou and Thomas, and on power play 2. Jake Neighbors is 57% owned in Cacupful. He's on line 2 with Buchnevich and Bolduc, but he's on power play 1. Both of them would be a great chance to try to pick up some points, especially if you correctly predict that Anaheim gives up 5 or 6 goals tomorrow. The other team I'm looking at for tomorrow is Chicago, because Chicago not only plays against San Jose, they play against a goalie who's making his first NHL start. San Jose has said that Devin Cooley will take the second half of the back-to-back. Cooley was the goalie at the University of Denver for a couple years, and has recently been about a 900 save percentage goalie in the AHL, minus 1 impressive run with the Milwaukee Admirals. He's played on a couple AHL teams, has not been anything impressive, and probably looks to be a career backup or third goalie. So this seems ripe to punish with getting some good Chicago players. Specifically, Tyler Johnson is 45% owned, and Philip Kurashev is 87% owned. Those are Connor Bedard's line mates, and they're playing on power play 1. I'm kind of expecting Bedard and company to feast against a back-to-back San Jose team playing a goalie who's never started before. And on that note, Peter Mrazek isn't a bad option either. At 60% owned, I'm assuming he'll get the game, with Soderblom having played on Friday. Thanks for listening. That's all I have time for. This episode was researched using Yahoo Fantasy, Frozen Tools, and Elon's custom Keeping Karlsson tools sheet, which can be found at keepingkarlsson.com/tools. I also used Kevin Hebert's Cupful ownership tool to check out the ownership percentages I was quoting to you. Best of luck in your matchup this week and in your fantasy playoffs.